what's intriguing about the story, don't push the parable too far. No one knows he's fired yet. And this is the suspense level. So Jesus punches them, but now they're on the edge of their seat. What's going to happen?
This is Ask Dr. E, where Dr. Michael Easley answers your biblical or theological questions in 10 minutes or less. Today's question comes from Karen from Forest City, Iowa.
I've never been there. Have you?
Neither have I. She says, Dr. E, I've often wondered about the meaning of Jesus' parable in Luke 16, the shrewd manager. Thank you. Like, there's not even like a question, really. It's just like, I've wondered about it.
I love it.
Go ahead.
I love it. Well, I'm going to, again, mention this in an earlier podcast we did. Kenneth Bailey, and we'll have some links. You can actually go and watch some of his old.
Oh, that's cool.
They're not high quality, of course, because they're older, but Kenneth Bailey, Poet and Peasant Through Peasant's Eyes. And the subtitle is A Literary Cultural Approach to the Parables in Luke. Now, that sounds kind of heavy, but part of the problem, as we talked about another parable, context is king. When you read a parable, you have to put yourself in a first century mindset of what that audience was hearing and understanding. And the shrewd manager is one of the great ones to talk about, because the way we read this, we scratch our heads going, this doesn't sound right.
Totally.
And the way Bailey explains it. But let me read just the first few verses, and then we'll talk about some of Bailey's observations, because this is where I learned how to study the parables and teach them over my lifetime. And another book we have talked about reading, Luke by Charles Talbert. So he's going to address most of the parables, not all of them, in that book as well. Now, he also was saying to the disciples, there was a rich man who had a manager, and the manager was reported to him as squandering his possessions. And he called him and said to him, what is this I hear about you? Give an accounting of your management, for you can no longer be manager. The manager said to himself, what shall I do, since my master is taking the management away from me? I'm not strong enough to dig. I am ashamed to beg. I know what I shall do, so that when I am removed from the management, people will welcome me into their homes. And he summoned each one of his master's debtor, and began saying to the verse, how much do you owe my master? And he said, 100 measures of oil. And he said to him, take your bill, sit down quickly, and write 50. And to another, how much do you owe? And he said, 100 measures of wheat. He said to him, take your bill and write 80. And this his master praised the unrighteous manager, because he had acted shrewdly. For the sons of this age are more shrewd in relation to their own kind than the sons of light. And I say to you, Jesus speaking, make friends for yourself by means of the wealth of unrighteousness, so that when it fails, notice it's going to fail. When it fails, they will receive you into eternal dwellings. So there's a lot going on in this text. And one of the things you have to understand is very common language they would understand completely. They would kind of be covering their mouth going, oh my word, a person would do this? And this is the punch that Jesus uses in his parables to get their attention. Let me just read a couple of sections I've highlighted from Bailey's book. The steward is summoned to address the first question. What is this I hear about you? And in the Semitic language, that would be like, confront it. What am I hearing about you? It's like an evaluation. And in the way they're going to hear that, it's off-putting for him to call him up in such a way. He explains the ultimatum to him, what's going to happen later. He's going to be fired for what he's done. So he's fired on the spot. And this conservative village today, a steward is always fired on the spot. An owner is afraid of exactly the kind of thing that would happen in this parable. The rascal has time, he will embezzle more. So you got to get him out. It's like when you find an employee stealing, you take their computer and they're out the door. The listener of the parable expects the steward to be silent after the first question, but he said, you're fired, turn in the books. In other words, the audience would be surprised that there was no argument. He didn't push back. I didn't do anything wrong. So he's culpable. And had he said anything in self-defense, it would have worked badly for him, right? Because the pet peeve is, here's a guy who's educated, but he's worthless.
Yeah.
He can't work.
Right.
He's ashamed to go out and ask for help. So the master is showing unusual mercy to this guy, even though he's dishonest. And I think one of the big lessons is your master expects obedience. Your master expects you to do what he's entrusted you to do. Mm-hmm. And this guy has usurped and again, that would be horrible. What's intriguing about the story, don't push the parable too far. No one knows he's fired yet. And this is the suspense level. Mm-hmm. So Jesus punches them, but now they're on the edge of their seat. What's going to happen? Mm-hmm. And so this guy is shrewd because he goes and cuts these deals. Now, if the master says, wait a minute, I fired that steward and you owe me 100, not 80.
Right.
It looks bad on the master. Mm. That's why he praises his unrighteousness. Mm. He said, okay, that was pretty shrewd.
You got me.
That was pretty shrewd. Before word got out, you were kind and gracious to people to pave the way for you. Mm-hmm. What Jesus then is saying, how much more for you who are a good steward. So learn from the ways of the world in the sense that, see what he did there? He was shrewd. He didn't do anything illegal.
Yeah.
He was fired. He went and changed the bills, which he could have done anyway. He shouldn't have done it.
Right.
But the master now is tied. The master can't renege on what these agreements were. The debtors are not partners in the crime. They didn't do anything wrong.
Right.
They didn't know he was fired. He didn't have the authority to do that. So the master is held over. A couple more things, and then you can interrupt me or ask me something intelligent because I need help here. The master knows full well that the local village has already started a great round of celebration and praise of him. The master, as the most noble and most generous man that ever rented land in their district. So he has two alternatives. He can explain it was a mistake, which ain't going to work. He can keep silent and accept the praise. And then he goes on, one of the Old Testament definitions of wisdom is an instinct for self-preservation. In a backhanded way, the actions of the steward are a compliment to his master. Oh. The steward knew the master was generous and merciful. He risked everything on this aspect of the master's reputation.
Okay, now that you can take to the bank. That is money.
He won. Because the master was indeed generous and merciful, he chose to pay the full price for the steward's salvation. In other words, the master is charitable. And so that's why there's got to be this, for the believer at that time going, that is the greatest story ever. Now, they know it's not true.
Right.
But the point of the parable is, look how a shrewd person can leverage things to their benefit, to his benefit, and even make the master look good on the way out the door. So he's not praising unrighteousness. He's not praising, he's praising the shrewdness of, and that's when he goes on to say, make friends for yourself by means of the wealth of unrighteousness. The mammon of the world is an economy. Yeah. If you've got non-Christian friends, be shrewd, be clever, be helpful to them, work in their commerce lane so that you have an opportunity to talk about righteous mammon. So I know people hate the word winsome. Be winsome. We overuse it.
Why do they hate the word?
I don't know. These trends come and go. But and then the point of this whole parable is you can't serve God and mammon.
Right.
He's not making mammon out to be the objective. He's saying use unrighteous mammon, which is the commerce of the world, for righteousness of God, because you're serving God, not money.
Do you think there's any tie to the three parables he tells before for the lost sheep, lost coin? Because that's what I was trying to go. I'm like, okay, the three parables before is his answer to the Pharisees when they're like, he reclines and eats with sinners, and Jesus is like, let me tell you how bad it gets, actually. And then he tells the lost coin and the lost sheep and the prodigal. Not how bad it gets, but
No,
Jesus is like, what you think about sinners and tax collectors, I'm going to blow your mind what the kingdom of God is really like. But so then I'm like going, okay, but then how does that, I guess that works within righteous steward. The kingdom of God blows the Pharisees, box that they've decided who's holy and who's in and who's out. And so the unrighteous steward is granted grace despite his, but kind of because of his.
Yeah, I don't overwork the
parable.
I don't think he's granting him grace. I think he's acknowledging that was clever. He's not saying, great job, go do it again.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, you were so shrewd with the use of something that wasn't yours. It was the master's.
Yeah.
But everybody looks good except you.
I mean, it does say the master praised him because he acted shrewdly.
Right. He's not, but I think it's because of the shrewdness, not his
unrighteousness.
He's obviously fired a guy.
Right.
So he didn't, but he said, okay, that's pretty dang clever because everybody wins in this thing except me, the master.
Yeah.
And I win in a way because my reputation looks great because I'm so generous.
Yeah.
And this guy's going to have another job opportunity, in the future as opposed to digging ditches, which you can't do. But to your point about the connections, yes, all these things, Luke's gospel is so tightly woven, and that's why these kind of books are so helpful because even a seminary-trained student who can work his way around Greek New Testament would never come up with what Kenneth Bailey has sewn together because he goes into these sandwiches and he shows the progression of these parables and why they are where they are. Mm-hmm. Your point of the lost sheep, lost coin, lost son, those are remarkable stories, but they culminate in the lost son, which, by the way, you know what the parable of the prodigal son is really about? Jacob and Esau.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's the New Testament story of Jacob and Esau.
Wow.
And then as he ends that parable in Luke 16 about your brother, your father, which is the conflict with Jacob and Esau, and so when this son of yours came home, and then he ends it, we had to celebrate and rejoice for this brother of yours who was dead has begun to live and was lost and has been found. Now he was also saying to the disciples, there was a certain rich man. So they all are tied together. Yeah. And we can't do it in 10 minutes, but this is a great study and a great plug to go look at some of what Ken Bailey has done on these parables and reading Luke by Charles Talbert. Yep.
Yeah, so good. All right, if you've got a question for Dr. E, call us, text us, email us. The info's in your show notes.